Hey guys, welcome to another Noda map. My name's Alex, and today I'm going to be taking you through a really awesome kind of like system called first principle thinking, and I'm going to show you how it can be used to apply it to yourself to kind of outline some maybe unhealthy beliefs and assumptions that you may have had, that you may have been operating on in your life. Say if, like, maybe you've been having some issues in your life with, anything like relationships, work, family, friendships, career, you name it. The idea is that you could be moving through the world with lots of kind of ways of being and behaving that are just completely unproductive, that are based on lies, assumptions, fears, things like that. So, using first principle thinking, the whole idea behind first principle thinking is getting at the fundamental kind of truths that are underlying everything and almost building this kind of foundation from the bottom up based on actual fundamental principles that are universal that you can use. Now, usually, first principle thinking is applied to kind of real world domains. Like Elon Musk popularized the term uh, in a couple of interviews because he was talking about he uses it in his company to get a handle on how to do things differently, how to cut corners, cut costs, and things like that, how to build better rockets or whatever. So, most commonly it's used in like more of a physical kind of in like domain, like like industry or something like that, to try and see how you might be doing things inefficiently and try and kind of build a new innovative kind of way of doing things. But what I really want to do is use it in more of a kind of an non-objective, like inner way, where we kind of turn inwards and we look at ourselves and our ideas and our beliefs about kind of ourselves and who we are and how we operate and how we treat people and all this type of stuff. So, stick with me on this, and it's a little bit jumbled, but I'm going to try and take you through it. You don't have to do this in virtual reality. You can do this just on paper. Follow me along. I'm going to kind of zip through some of it because I've got a lot of stuff here, a lot of information. So you can pause the video, have a look at some of the stuff I've included, and maybe kind of research it. But let's just try and get stuck in and let's just wing it as we go and see how we get on. I'll warn you, I get quite personal here, and there's some situations and things that I address that could be distressing to some, because I've been in quite a distressing situation in my life recently, which is what's kind of led me to do this. So I'm really putting myself on the line here and I'm making myself vulnerable. And to be honest, I'm nervous and going to be talking about some quite personal things. But the idea is that I'm trying to grow, and I'm trying to say, this is who I was. Okay. These are the things that happened. These are the choices that I made. I'm trying to grow myself, and this is how I'm doing it. I'm taking personal accountability and I'm laying it all on the table. David Goggins talks about this quite a lot. You have to look into your own weaknesses, your own bullshit, your own lies. That's where you find the true inspiration and the true path to grow yourself. So I've really, really found this useful. And I'm just going to give you this kind of system for how to do this. It's kind of almost like giving yourself a new operating system. Once we start looking at some of these core beliefs and assumptions we have, and some of these repetitive thought patterns and things like that, we can kind of dig into them and use them in order to extract these kind of juicy principles that we then want to use moving forward and kind of have as our foundational way of kind of being. Might all sound a little bit esoteric right now, but once we start getting into the process, you'll see what I mean. So we're going to start off just quickly by running you through almost what's the default way that we're showing up here before we've even implemented this first principle thinking way of doing things. What have we got? We've got this thing called artificial complexity. What is that? So artificial complexity is the default way that the brain usually works in order to kind of keep you stuck in a paradigm or way of thinking that kind of limits you. And it's very kind of cyclical, and you just go around in circles. You never really change, you never do anything differently. And it happens really because what tends to happen is if we do decide that we have like a problem, or there's something that's bothering us or something that's causing us discomfort, we feel that discomfort, but then what do? Usually we kind of avoid the core truth underneath it. Often not purposefully, usually just because we don't take the time to actually dig into things. We might sort of briefly stop and think, what is this all about? Why am I having this problem? Why do I keep having these arguments with my spouse or whatever? And then we kind of we think we come up with ideas like, I don't know, or this is scary. We feel like afraid. We feel afraid by the fact that we don't know. We might end up deflecting attention away from the issue because it's just too much. Our brains almost can't cope with all the questions that it brings up and the kind of the not knowing. So we end up doing things like hiding these contradictions. If we highlight the fact that there's any kind of contradictions in our thinking, we just kind of gloss over them, and we come up with very kind of quick sound bites or quick ideas just in order to avoid that inconsistency. And we come up with just throwaway statements like, oh, they're just jealous, or the system's rigged, or whatever. We distract ourselves. Let's just optimize this unrelated side task. We bury any inconsistencies, and then we kind of go on and we almost build complexity in order to keep avoiding things. And this is a way that we kind of feel that we're addressing something, but we're really not. We might come up with like elaborate plans, like a 20-step plan or something like that. Or we're going to read like 5 self-help books in a month or whatever. And then we'll pick up all these kind of buzzwords and models and things like that. And models are useful. First principle thinking is a model, but the cool thing about it is that it's really, really drilling into the core part of the problem, and it's making real world changes based on actual experience. And it's not just kind of making yourself like feel better by thinking you're doing something, just taking in conceptual information. We're actually investigating ourselves, we're investigating our mind, we're laying it all bare, and then we're actually coming up with a system based on our actual experience of our mind and what our mind is doing, and we're actually building like a completely new system. So I don't want to diss all models because we're using a model. And then, whether it works or not, we'll just rationalize the outcome or whatever. This outcome makes sense because of X, Y, and Z. We'll choose consistency over correctness. If this solution has helped us in the past, then we'll just use it again. It may not help us over time, it may not solve the problem, but it's worked for now. Maybe we've meditated for a couple of weeks and we're feeling a little bit more relaxed or whatever. But as soon as we forget to meditate, then that monkey mind is going to kick back in again, and all those problems that we sort of shoved under the rug are going to kind of come back up again. Not dissing meditation, it's brilliant, but there's a lot of things that we can do that don't kind of get to the core of the issue. There's this new term going around now, spiritual bypassing, and I've been guilty of that, where you come up with these cute spiritual ideas that sound good, and you may get these ideas in your head like, my identity is just an illusion. And because you decide that your identity is an illusion, which there's some truth to that, it means you don't have to work on yourself because it's all an illusion anyway. If I create a new identity for myself, that's just going to be an illusion too. So there are shortcuts, is what I'm trying to get at. And all this does is it just gets away from the core issue, and the core fundamental underlying truth of what would actually work for you. Okay. And there's a way to kind of extract that and get to that. And that's what we're going to look at. Now, I've rushed through this a little bit, to be honest. Some of this stuff I kind of took down in a hurry, but it's really not the point. I just wanted to show you that there is a default way that our minds usually work to almost kind of sidetrack a problem and not address it. So, what is first principle thinking? Well, first of all, we define the problem or the goal. What is it that I'm actually trying to solve, change, or achieve? And the structure of the process that we follow for first principle thinking will shift based on the type of domain we're looking at. Is it more of a business domain? Is it emotional versus mechanical? Is it more philosophical? Okay. And the problem type. Is it a practical task? Is it a strategy we're looking at? Are we having some type of identity crisis? So the type of problem will determine slightly kind of how we do things, but the process is sort of follows a similar trajectory irrespective of the particular issue. So firstly, what we do, the first part of any first principle thinking model is to break down the current system, is to look at it in a very descriptive way, not kind of analyzing it yet and trying to work out the why, but it's more kind of looking at what is happening, what is already here. Okay. You could call it like a research phase. And it can sort of apply to, again, more of like an objective mechanical domain. Like I'll show you in a minute, but let's just think about the example of YouTube and trying to grow like your YouTube following. That's a very kind of real world domain. It's not very kind of internal. You're not really so much digging into your beliefs and assumptions. You are to a degree, but it's a lot more kind of external. You're learning about the external world and you're researching things. So for example, you might have sources like experts, books, videos. You might be kind of doing research just to look at, what is the typical accepted way of approaching YouTube marketing at the moment if you're going to grow your following. What do the experts say? What do the books say are the main factors when it comes to growing a YouTube following? All right. And then once you've got all that down, you're going to kind of look at where you stand on each of those factors. If you're addressing it, are you doing anything in that area? So again, we deconstruct the situation, we don't analyze it. So you can't think from first principles if you don't understand the system you're deconstructing. That's what this first part is all about. If you don't know how YouTube works, you can't break down how to grow on YouTube properly. If you don't understand the brain, if we're looking at something more non-objective, you can't break down rumination or anxiety. So you're not looking for advice at this stage, all right? You're just looking to understand the components of the system so you can think for yourself. When you don't know the system, you can feel like you're already an expert because, you've got all these assumptions and beliefs, and the presumption is that whatever it is you're doing, it's ineffective, hence why you're carrying out this process in the first place, all right? So basically, you examine what's thought of to be best practice in the field, and you note whether you're doing that. All right. So that's the first part, current system breakdown. And let me just quickly show you how that relates to. So I'll just quickly show you how that relates, say, to YouTube. And I'm just doing this. This video, we're looking at something non-objective. Like I said, we're going to looking at our assumptions and beliefs, and the particular issue that I'm going to be dealing with is something a lot more kind of psychological. But I'm just giving you an example of how this could be used in a more tangible, objective domain like YouTube. So say if we were picking apart the system of growing likes on YouTube, or growing views rather, or building an audience. So say if our question, the problem we're starting with is, how can I consistently grow an audience on YouTube that engages with my content? So I've outlined all of these green boxes here are the main areas you want to look at. So consistency and frequency that you're putting content out. And then on from that, that's your schedule, your upload frequency. Am I building momentum, or am I just dropping content into the void? Content quality, is it useful, relatable, entertaining? I mean, you can pause this and look at this if this is something that interests you, just so you get an idea of how you actually construct this first part of the process if you're doing first principle thinking. And this could be absolutely anything. This could be your field, like a hobby you've got, your job. What are all the different elements that you can discover based on research that determine success in that domain? Right? What else have we got? Conversion mechanics. Is there a clear call to action in your videos? Are you giving them a reason to come back? Your distribution channels. Are you sharing through other channels? All right. Algorithm triggers, content packaging, brand identity. So, like I say, it's descriptive. At this point, we're not saying how useful is this element. We're just saying that we have identified, based on our research, that this is an element, brand identity. There are people out there saying that if there's a story that people can follow from your content, they'll be more likely to come back and click. We don't know if that's true or not yet. We're just outlining all of the elements there. Okay. Now that's part one. Okay, guys. Current system breakdown. So the next part is part three. All right. We've done the current system breakdown up here, and then we move down. And this part is more subjective. So this is the part where we actually highlight and we question our beliefs and assumptions regarding these fundamental parts. And I'm not going to dig into each one of these elements here. Like I said, you can pause it, you can have a look at them. It's just to give you a general idea. But you're asking questions like, what is this made of for me? Where did this belief come from? What have I accepted without proof? What do I believe about this? Examine how you interpret all of the observations that you've already identified. So if you're looking at, say, like brand awareness, how do you interpret that? What are your thoughts about it? Do you think that it's a good thing? Do you think that it's worth it, or it's a waste of time? Do you think that it's just a time sink? So you're uncovering the mental wiring you've just been following unconsciously. You might determine there are certain elements that you've been focusing on more. So like your YouTube videos, you've been taking all this time to make sure they're entertaining, but you haven't been looking at the kind of metrics and trying to understand, how you can get the videos out to more people. If we were going to be doing this, we would be looking at, what am I doing here? What am I doing for the distribution channels? Currently using any? Why am I not? What is it? Have I even thought about it? What are my thoughts on it? Do I think that it's worthwhile? If I don't, why not? Why don't I think it's worthwhile? What am I basing that on? Have I done any research? What's my consistency and frequency? My schedule at the moment, I've used these white boxes as part of the third step to kind of almost highlight where I'm at or where I stand on these particular elements, and I've sort of blended it with the current system breakdown just to sort of give me an idea. So my upload frequency is weekly or sporadic. Could it be daily? If it was daily, would that make a difference? What are my views on that? Too much effort? Too much of a time sink? What metrics am I currently tracking? So again, the first step is underlying what the actual current system is, irrespective of what you're doing. And then the next part is looking at how you're actually relating to each of those elements, how you're thinking about them, how you're utilizing them. Actually really, really examining what relationship you have with them. You're not looking to see what's true yet. You're just looking to sort of see what your viewpoints are on them, like how you're relating to them. So we're looking at our beliefs and assumptions. So in the next part, where we actually try and extract these first principles, we're going to be looking not so much about anything we've taken for granted, but we're going to actually be looking at, what does the research say? What does science say? What does physics say? What does behavioral psychology say? And that's how we start extracting these actual first principles that aren't based on these assumptions or beliefs that we've got about these elements, but they're actually based on core known factors and truths about the world in which we live in. So that's what you're doing. You're kind of moving aside your beliefs and assumptions, or you're testing them to see how much they kind of fit with these fundamental underlying kind of truths that we start to look at. And that's where you go with the main part here, where you start to extract the fundamental truths or first principles. Okay, you start to look at physics, direct experience. You start to actually test some of these assumptions out and gain actual raw data. Assumptions and beliefs, a lot of the time, they're not based on actual direct experience. They're based on biases. So what you're starting to do is you're starting to test some of these elements out to see if they make a difference. You could implement brand identity and actually see, do your likes go up? Are you getting more clicks once you've got some consistency there with branding? You're looking at cross-context human behavior, stripping away all of your beliefs and assumptions and biases to see what remains, what fundamental truths remain underneath. Okay, what is undeniably true here, regardless of opinion, emotion, or tradition. So it's almost like you're shifting all of that subjective stuff out of it, and you're trying to kind of really dig into it, and you're trying to get at how much of what you're assuming is just not being based on real world kind of evidence or fundamental principles. So if the first part of the process is all about what is happening, what is here descriptively, all of the elements there, then when we get down to the first principle part, then we're really looking at what is true here. Okay, what is actually happening? And once we've got these fundamental truths, we can start rebuilding from the ground up, create a new strategy, an idea, or an understanding using only those fundamental truths. And then we take it into the field and we apply the new model. Now, I haven't probably done the best job in explaining the core of what first principle thinking is. I've got some other pieces of information here. Again, you can have a little look at these. So firstly, we break things into parts, then we surface our beliefs about each part and challenge those beliefs, then we extract the unshakable truths. Or another way of putting it is, we know the system. So it's introspective when the system is you, investigative when the system is out there. Then you know your mind related to the system. And the third part is actually knowing the reality. That's the first principle. So that's it in a nutshell. And that's just a bit of information about what a first principle is supposed to be. Universally applicable, cross-domain, cannot be further reduced, doesn't depend on convention, analogy, or trends, and explains why something works, not just how. You could have some knowledge that a certain thing works, but you don't know why. If you knew the why behind why it's working, you might be able to manipulate things in an even more efficient way. So you start wide to begin with the first part, okay, where you're determining what the system is, and then you zone down in a more personal way to see how you're relating to each element of that system of your beliefs and your assumptions. And then in the next part, the first principle part, then you're actually looking at what's true, and you're measuring that up against your beliefs and your assumptions to see, how much disparity there is there. Okay. And then you're really thinking, you're kind of rebuilding your mind on the situation from reality up. In a more physical domain, that might be, some real tangible things you might be doing differently. Perhaps you'll be, your whole process, say like you worked in a manufacturing sense, your process of manufacturing might end up being different. Or, we're going to be looking at more of the non-objective mental domain, and we're going to look at, how we're going to be building our reality up using more kind of values and stronger reality-based values. So we've looked at how first principle thinking applies to an objective domain like YouTube likes or whatever, or building your audience. And this is just a little flow chart that I made for a more non-objective domain, which is going to be the bulk of what we're going to be looking at. And we're really going to dig into it in a minute, guys. So I hope that your head's not spinning too much, or you're not too bored already. I mean, you've even have skipped this whole initial part and just dug straight into, the process that I'm going to start to go through in a minute, with looking at this core problem that I've been having and how I've addressed it. So here, this is where I feel like first principle thinking for me is just like paid off dividends, because I've actually used it as myself, as the system, my actual train of thought and my behavior and actions and beliefs and assumptions as the kind of system that I've picked apart. So, and really, I can't stress enough how life-changing this could be for you. Like, I've already found it's made a massive difference to me, and I've still yet to go ahead and kind of start to take some of these new values and things I've discovered out into the real world and apply them. But I can just see how absolutely powerful it is, and it has already helped change the kind of structure of my thinking and my mind and some of the biases I've had, just literally from going through this process. Now, this is the sort of thing that you might end up doing, or that you might do with a therapist, or in CBT perhaps, or something like that. So this is like, it's almost like a form of therapy, what we're doing here. Okay, a form of real kind of digging into almost like our shadow side, and having a look at some of these kind of negative kind of ways that we've got of being. And this can be really transformative if you follow this through and you do this process. I mean, I really recommend that you get VR and do this properly, and you can jump into these maps. I'll send you the links for these. If you've got VR, you can jump in and use my maps. But so here we're describing the experience of my rumination. We're not analysing it, it's descriptive. What are the components that make it up experientially? All right. And I've determined that there's a physiological state that I experience: racing heart, tension. I mean, these aren't everything. These aren't all things I've experienced in this circumstance. These are just examples. Numbness, fight or flight response, shallow breathing, fatigue. So those all come under that heading of physiological state, and they're an element of that experience. Okay. And it's helpful to do this. It gives you almost like a bird's eye view of the situation, so you can kind of step outside of it and look at it, and it makes you feel a little bit empowered as well, because you're not just kind of lost in that experience. We're actually taking a look at it here. And then what else have we got? So we've got repetitive thought patterns. Now these are huge, and any type of rumination that you're experiencing, any type of negative thoughts, this is going to be a part of it, of course. Thought patterns, things that keep popping up again and again that you just can't shake, and they just keep you locked in this cycle. All right, like replaying past events, thinking things like, oh, I shouldn't have said that, regrets, what if scenarios, mental images and things like that that just kind of pop up in your head. They're just kind of like clusters, if you will, of thoughts that you just get kind of locked in. And we're going to outline what they are. And these will be the most pivotal things that will lead to us being able to discern what our particular beliefs are, because we can kind of extract beliefs from those thought patterns. We've also got triggers. What triggers my rumination? It's good to look at those. It's empowering to actually think about the kinds of situations that you might be in, the kinds of environments that you might be in that could set you off, the kinds of emotions you might be feeling, kind of thoughts you might be having. Again, that's really linked to repetitive thought patterns, but those are more, I guess, sort of isolated, just thoughts that pop up in your head. Repetitive thought patterns are a little bit kind of broader. And specific memories, to look into the experience of memory and how it's actually playing out for you, how it's working, and the part that it's playing to trigger you into, a repetitive thought pattern or an emotion. These things are all interrelated, all right? And like I said before, your beliefs, those are going to be the most important elements that we're going to look at from this current system breakdown. And the reason being is because when we go down into this next part here, where we highlight and question our beliefs and assumptions, this is the part where we're actually going to be looking at beliefs and assumptions. So it's important that we know what our beliefs are. So with the first principle part of this particular process, for more non-objective domains, when we're looking at our psychology or whatever, the first principles are a little bit different in the sense of we're choosing them a little bit more. We're deciding what we want those first principles to be. And they're a little bit more subjective than, say, a first principle would be in the realm of, say, like mechanics or science. Because, we might end up just replacing one belief with a more productive belief. And the belief that we replace it with might not necessarily be a fundamental truth, but it might just be something more healthy. So in a relative sense, we could say it's more true in the sense of, it causes less suffering. It's true that it causes less suffering for us. I hope that makes some sense. We might replace something like a belief like, I am worthless with, I determine my worth. It's not fundamentally true that I have worth, because worth is just a human made invention. But it's true that I can decide what I want my worth to be. So perhaps these aren't as kind of relevant here for extracting fundamental truths, the sort of fundamental truths we'll be getting at. And lots of people might say that some of the things we eventually kind of get to won't even kind of qualify as first principles. And I could be screwing up the entire model of first principles for all I know. But anyway, it's my kind of version of it. And what we're doing is we're just going to be going through, we're going to be looking at some negative beliefs that we have, and we're going to be changing them. And we're going to be looking at, how we can instill ourselves with a healthier set of values and show up in the world in kind of ways that cause us less suffering, that are more efficient, more productive. So it's almost like a redesign job, rather than necessarily going in and kind of extracting kind of the fundamental sort of truths, because it's more of a non-objective psychological domain that we're kind of looking at. But, some of the things we will be looking at, some of the truths, the first principles that we will highlight, could quite easily be seen as fundamental truths. But you'll have to decide for yourself. So just to say, when the problem is internal, like self-image, rumination, anxiety, we can actually rely on direct experience a bit more straight away than we would be able to do if we were looking at more of a mechanical, objective domain, like, manufacturing or gaining YouTube followers or whatever. because we are the system that we're looking at, it's quite useful because we can go in and we've actually had direct experience of some of these elements that we're looking at. So introspective insight, emotion tracking, memory, behavior patterns. You are the system. You're pulling apart your own psychology with honesty, attention, and courage. All right. And this is going to take a bit of courage. It won't always be easy. Okay. I loved it because I'm weird like that. And I tend to feel good. If I feel like I'm making progress, I get really kind of excited. And also, if I find a way of doing something that works. This has actually worked for me. I can't tell you how much time I've spent doing personal development and reading books and meditating and all that sort of stuff and reading about these things, but I've never actually found a way of doing it. This system in virtual reality where I can actually see things and create these nodes and explore these maps, it just works for me. These mind maps just work for me. They're very, very in line with how my brain works. And this is what I'm hoping is going to benefit you guys if you can actually look through this, see how it's all happening visually in front of you, rather than me just standing there talking at a screen, explaining this to you. You can actually see all of this shit happening. All right. Now I'm going to go on to the next map here that I've created, and I'm going to show you how to kind of start doing this. I'm going to take you through the whole process that I've followed for solving this issue of mine. How can I stop ruminating on the past and stay present and focused? Hey guys, so I'm going to take you through this process of first principle thinking now, and we're going to be looking at how it can be used to sort of, create a new kind of value system. So look at some unhealthy beliefs and assumptions that we may have. I'm going to be applying it to my own life, and I'm going to be showing you how I've kind of used it to address a specific problem and come up with some really good first principles that I've started to implement in my life. Now, before I do this, I'll just outline to you some of the context behind why I've been ruminating, why I actually started following this process in the first place. And I'm going to be quite open and vulnerable with you here. I really believe that it's important to be able to be vulnerable and open, even despite having done things that we're not proud of. And trust me, there's a lot of stuff here that I'm really not proud of. But doing this process is helping me to deal with that. And I've learned a lot about even things like that, about shame and blaming myself and how to deal with that. So I'll try and put this as concisely as possible so I don't draw it out because it's quite a long story. But I was in a relationship, we were very in love, but it ended. We clashed over various things, that's not really important, and we ended up separating. So I got this job working in a shop. And while I was working in the shop, I ended up getting friendly with this guy there who had a really dark, sort of blue sense of humour. I've got quite a perverted sense of humour, I'll be honest with you. And I used to struggle with this a lot in the past in jobs where I'd be, say, kind of dumb, inappropriate kind of things and get in trouble. I haven't done it in a long time. Like, I've worked as a librarian and I've worked in the care industry, and it's sort of like I've grown up and matured a bit. But I was around this dude who was cracking these really inappropriate jokes all the time, and I kind of got into the habit too, especially because it seemed like it was normal there. Like, this guy was really popular and he just got away with blue murder, saying inappropriate things about customers, saying slightly perverted things to some of the younger girls that were working there. And I kind of started following suit. And I ended up getting in trouble because a bunch of the girls there got together and told the manager that I'd been inappropriate and said some weird, inappropriate things around them. It took me by surprise because, like I say, I thought it was kind of quite normalized there. So I ended up quitting just because there was going to be this investigation to see if it was true. Anyway, I just left, and it was just devastating to me. But the worst thing about it, the worst thing of all, is at one point I come out with a couple of inappropriate jokes, or an inappropriate joke about my ex. And fuck, man, this is hard. This is so fucking hard. So one of the jokes I told, just being careless, was about my ex, and it was some personal information that she wouldn't have wanted to be public, okay? And it was just to make some people laugh. I think I was also a bit bitter because of how the relationship had ended and she'd been ignoring me and stuff. And I don't know, I've tried to work out why I said it, why I made that joke, but it came out. And when I got pulled up to the manager's office, when he told me there'd been these allegations against me and things I'd been saying, one of them included this comment that I'd made about my ex. Now, she was one of these people that knew everyone around the local area, and I asked him if he thought that it would have got back to her, the fact that this had been said and people had found out about it. He said quite possibly, and I should just fess up and tell her, do the right thing. So I did. I told her. I sent her an email and I said, look, I'm a despicable human being. I made this joke, I was careless and a few people seem to know about it. I just wanted to kind of let you know. I don't know why I told her, but I did. Anyway, she flipped out and came over. She wanted to go through my computer to see if I had any videos of her that I'd shared. I'd not done anything like that, but she wanted to do that to put her mind at rest. So I let her. I sat there while she went through my MacBook and my phone. And obviously she was just incredibly angry and in a state of just kind of like survival mode. Just, I've never seen her in such a state, and I was terrified, but I was hoping that maybe we could kind of work through it and maybe she would kind of forgive me or whatever. But to her, I mean, it was just a awful thing to have happened because she was worried this rumor was going to spread further and it was going to get back to people where she worked, etc. So anyway, she just lays into me and she's saying all this stuff. She tells me that they were calling me weird behind my back. And because she actually had phoned someone at work and this woman had told her, yeah, she'd got wind of this rumor, so it had spread a little bit. This is what I mean. She knew people that worked there. And they were calling me weird behind my back and like a pervert. She sat and she went through my phone and she saw some of the text messages that had been going back and forth with this guy I worked with, and some of them were just like inappropriate. This guy was just like saying sexual stuff about some of the girls that worked at work, like just things like perving over them or whatever, and I was going along with it. A lot of it, I've always been a bit of a people pleaser, and I didn't really know how to say that I felt a bit uncomfortable having these sorts of conversations. But a big part of it as well is that I just am a bit fucked up and I have got a bit of a perverse sense of humour and I'm a bit sex obsessed. So she saw all these texts anyway that painted me in a really bad light. And she told me that she'd contacted the police and told them that I'd been harassing her. So I just was like, what? Like, you've done what? You've contacted the police? Anyway, she left after she just completely obliterated me verbally. Left. And then a few days later, I got arrested. And I was accused of harassment. I was accused of watching extreme pornography. She told them I'd been watching extreme pornography. And she told them that I'd been looking at some fucked up stuff. Now, and I'm getting to the end of the story here, some of the stuff she said was true. I had viewed extreme pornography. Unfortunately, I'd gone down a rabbit hole with the sort of stuff I'd been watching. I don't need to go into detail about what it was. It wasn't illegal. It was just weird and warped. And, I got exposed to pornography when I was way too young, and I just spiraled over the years. Some of the stuff she said was true. The thing that she said that got me in trouble wasn't true, but because of the nature of what she said that she'd seen on my computer when she was looking through it, they seized my laptop and my phone. It was the worst experience of my life. I got marched out in front of my neighbours, arrested, put in a cell. The harassment charge was thrown out straight away. I was told that the extreme porn I'd looked at wasn't illegal, but obviously the other allegation about what she'd seen on my computer, the nature of it was illegal. Now, I know that I don't look at that sort of stuff. I never have looked at that sort of stuff. But still, I'm terrified, right? I don't know what's happened. My mind isn't being rational anymore. I'm thinking, did something find its way onto my computer? Whatever. So, anyway, I get released on bail. 6 months later, they've still got my stuff. Now, I've gone through a lot of resentment, as you could imagine. I know what I did was messed up. I know that I should never have said those things at work, those personal things about her. But to then go and do that, which to me has looked almost like a revenge attack, because how could she have seen something? There was nothing there to see. I know what was on my computer. So it's either she was that crazy in that frame of mind that she thought she saw something, or she just did it to get revenge. I don't know. But to have someone arrested, this is someone that said I was her soulmate. She went down the road of revenge and hatred rather than reconciliation. Now, I've struggled a lot with that. I've gone through different modes of thinking. I've gone through blame, guilt, shame, resentment, the whole 9 yards, guys. And my life has been on hold. I haven't been able to work. I've been too terrified to go back out and work because of worrying about who I am and what I might say to people. And also just this whole thing like hanging over my head. Just the not knowing of it, just the fear of it, the fear of the what if I had clicked on a link, what if something had ended up on my computer. It's just been the worst experience of my life. I've not heard from her. I don't know what she still thinks about me or whatever, but the rumination that I've been talking about is related to that. And I thought it was important for me to get that out there. And again, like I say, I told you, this is not child's play. This is hardcore stuff, guys. Now imagine that's what I'm going through, and it probably isn't as fucked up as what most of you guys are going through. But this has really helped me, all right? And if this can help me with such a drastic, serious, traumatic situation, I'm sure it can help you. And I just wanted to tell you that because it's relevant, because some of the stuff that you'll be seeing, some of the content you'll be seeing, it will be more, you'll understand it more, it's fitted into that context. And I just wanted to be open. I'm tired of hiding. And this whole process is me just saying, this is who I was, and this is who I want to become. These are the actions I took. This is what I did. I no longer want to be showing up in the world like that. Oh, and just another addition I wanted to add. Her son, she's got a son who's like 21, 22. He's been involved in it too. He's been aggressive towards me and hostile. I passed him in the street and he shouted something out to me. He called me a weirdo or something. So that's been quite stressful too. I live in the same city as her. It's not a really huge city. It's not really small either, but it's the sort of place where you can bump into people. I've been too scared to go out. I've been too scared to go and do shopping. It's just fucked me up really badly. So I thought I should add that in because that will be relevant. Some of the beliefs and the thought patterns you'll see will be related to that situation where I saw him and my thoughts about kind of him and how he's decided to sort of react and the road he's gone down with it all. So here what I've done is I've followed more of like a horizontal line with the process before we saw everything going down kind of vertically. Over here again, you can just see this is the process we follow. So step one, all of this stuff over here is where we define the system and what's already there. And then this next part here, as you'll see in a minute, we'll go through and we'll look at some of the beliefs and assumptions, and then we'll go through and we'll extract some of the first principles we want to use to operate by moving forward. This first part is the current system breakdown. So this is everything that's already there for me in my direct experience in relation to my rumination. What is my rumination actually comprised of? All right. It's comprised of triggers. And I'm not going to spend too much time just delving into the absolute minutiae of all of these, but the way I've done this with my triggers and looking at the things that trigger my rumination is looking at the thoughts that I might have that trigger the rumination. So I might have a certain thought like, I'm wasting my time being unemployed. And this is why you can see now how just giving you that context for what I'm going through is just a little bit more helpful here. So I might start thinking, God, I'm wasting my time being unemployed. And then I might start thinking about her and ruminating. All right. And then I've linked it to an emotion. So disappointment. When I think that thought, I feel disappointment. So you can start going through these guys and you can start highlighting the specific thoughts that you might be having that are causing you some stress. Now, you might not be looking at rumination, but I would guarantee you that a lot of these elements we're looking at are going to be applicable to any type of psychological issue you might be having. You know, a lot of you will be looking at maybe past trauma, how to deal with like relationship breakup, things like that. And a lot of these things are going to be universal, guys, all right? So frustration with being unemployed, there'll be some resentment there, you know, some like, oh, for fuck's sake, it's her fault, you know. Sometimes the emotion might come first. I might feel resentment, and from that resentment I might start thinking about the fact I'm unemployed. It's hard to say sometimes, right, which one comes first, but they're very interrelated. Like, I might think like, oh, my reputation's ruined, some worry surrounding that. All right. Now, as I started to go through, I really noticed more and more about the type of triggers or the type of thoughts I was having that were triggering me to ruminate. And that's the great thing. The great thing about going through this process is it shines a light, and it actually makes you more mindful and aware of the type of things that are causing you triggers and how small sometimes those things can be. Like, for example, I closed the toilet lid, and then I thought about how she used to slam it. Now, before I started this process, I wouldn't even have been aware that that was the thing that was causing me to start ruminating. But after I start doing this process and outlining all this stuff, I actually am kind of looking out more for these triggers, and I'm noticing them like, whoa, that was a trigger, you know? That made me feel like, I don't know, maybe it made me feel like yearning, like, oh, that was kind of sweet when she used to do that, even though it used to bug me a bit. Or I was cooking rice, and then I thought about how she used to like my rice, like she used to compliment it. So then I started feeling like longing. That was kind of a sweet kind of little thing that we had together, and some sadness and some affection. All right, so I don't need to go into every single one of these, but as you can see, there's other thoughts here, and these are repetitive thoughts that I would have a lot, and I still do sometimes, but since doing this, it's got a lot better. So I'd think about her coming over, like I told you, she came over and went through my stuff, you know. Obviously, there'd be some kind of resentment there. Him shouting out to me in the street, I'd replay that in my mind. It was so horrible, you know, having that, like just cycling down the road and having some. And this is someone that I used to live with. He was a family member. He was her son. We played Monopoly together at Christmas, and he's yelling stuff out to me in the street, you know, like really freaked me out. Okay. And there was another time as well when we'd had this argument where he brought my stuff over with some of his friends and was kind of intimidating. So all this stuff was me ruminating, and these are all the associated emotions. Okay. And this is really helpful. And then when you look at maybe some environments that would cause triggers, like, walk past our favourite coffee shop or our favourite walking spot. Specific memories. Now, this is like the domain of memory. And some of this may be a little bit overkill. You maybe don't need to go quite so deep into this, but it's quite useful when we get to the point of kind of looking at beliefs. And it's also just useful to see how memory plays a part. So, for example, with the thought about closing the toilet lid and about how she used to slam it, the specific memory was the toilet lid slamming. Okay. And these are the specific memories here. You can do that. You don't have to do that. It can be useful. Behaviors. These are things that I'm doing when I start the rumination. Again, these are all things that trigger the rumination. The memories trigger the rumination. Okay. The behaviors trigger the rumination. Closing the toilet lid. So the things I can look out for. When I'm cooking rice, I may be looking out for that. All right, triggers. Now, what have we got? So, next up, we've got repetitive thought patterns. And this is where we're really able to start digging into discovering what our beliefs are. And that's what we're really trying to uncover here. Is some of the beliefs that we've got that are causing us kind of a lot of pain, and also beliefs that may have caused the situation to begin with, that may have led to me behaving in a certain way that got me into this trouble. Right now, the way I've structured this, and again, you can do this on paper, guys, just write down repetitive thought patterns and just write them down. What thoughts are you having again and again? And again, these can be related sort of to the thoughts we had over in the trigger section here, but these are a little bit more kind of fleshed out, if you will. Like, what would I say if I saw her again? All right. I had this image of bumping into her. Now, that is major. It keeps coming up in my mind. Now, what would I say? Would I try and be magnanimous? Would I try and be nice? Would I say sorry again? Would I get angry? Would I say, how could you do this to me? I didn't deserve this. So then I have these different thought patterns I'll go through. Sometimes I feel like, oh, I'll tell her what happened. Maybe she doesn't even know that the police took my stuff. Maybe she didn't even realise that would happen. She's not the smartest tool in the shed. She probably didn't even realise that was a possibility. These are thoughts I have, right? So when I think that, I'd tell her what happened. I have this feeling of like relief and hope, and I wasn't aware of that before. I sense that when I think, if I could tell her, she would say sorry. She probably didn't want that to happen. That brings me some relief, because if I then tell myself that she would feel bad if she knew, I can feel relief. I can feel like, oh, she didn't mean to damage me like that. It's very, very hurtful to think that someone could actually go out of their way to hurt you like that. I mean, what I did was careless. What she did was intentionally go out to damage me, to make up a malicious lie about me to the law that could actually, that has put my life on hold for 6 months. So, I'd be loving. That would feel the best. Relief, resentment. Because, when I think about, I'd say nice things to her, then maybe she'd feel bad because she'd think, he is a nice guy. He hasn't gone down the route of being angry. And then I had this other thought. No, I'd just take a deep breath and walk away. And that would make me look like I was really mature, like I'd grown loads. I don't even need to engage. How does that feel? Some pride. Oh, and then I have this one. Give it to her straight. Tell her what she's done to me. And then I have this fantasy about just verbally just attacking her, just telling her what I think about her, calling her all these horrible names, saying these things to her, just so I can signal how much she's messed up. Because, like, I can't stand the idea that she's got away with it, And as you'll see as we go through this process, I kind of start to deal with that emotion and that resentment more and more. But that's been a big part of it, is that idea of how dare she? How dare she do something like that and just be able to walk away from it and not have any any comeback at all? It's just not right. It's not fair. It's not just. That's how it feels sometimes, right? And when I think about giving her that verbal assault, it's kind of cathartic. I can feel the hatred bubbling up in me, the resentment, right? And again, I'm well aware of what I did. I'm well aware of what I put her through. And as we follow through the process, you'll see the transition kind of happening in me, where I'm moving more from resentment and a victim identity more to accountability, which is what this has kind of helped me to do. So we go through, right? And again, I won't dig in massively to every single one of these elements, but it's just to show you how it's done. Okay. So whatever the problem is that you're having, go in, write down what these repetitive thoughts that you're having are. So if you're working on some past trauma or some resentment you have towards a family member or whatever, what are the thoughts you keep having? What are the repetitive thought patterns? What are the memories or the things that keep popping up, or the words you keep hearing in your head, right? And what I've done as well is I've outlined the mental images that are related to these, just because I thought it was helpful. You don't have to do it, but so I've got this here. God, what happens if I see him again and he shouts out? I've had that thought again. If I bump into him again, all right? I've had this image of that happening, him doing that again. I see him in the street. Again, this is shining a light on what is usually a bit more subconscious. It feels nice to do that. It's like, oh yeah, I can see him. I can see him in my head. I can see the look on his face. The look of aggression. Sort of smarmy, sort of self-righteous grin that he's got, like a real like air of confidence. And then I see me cycling away again. And I have these different thoughts about what I'd do. I'd confront him. Then actually, it would be smart to ignore it. And again, I list the emotions. So when I think of confronting him, there's a sense of catharsis, empowerment, fear. It's nervous. I would feel nervous confronting him. And then when I think about ignoring it, I feel like relief. Oh no, that would be a good idea. Calm. I don't like to think of the idea of confronting him in a sense. Even though it feels empowering, it feels almost like it could spiral. I go through this. Who talked at work? Did it spread further? I didn't deserve this. They ganged up on me. Why did I listen to him and tell her? Is she with someone else? Rather him than me. She's wrecked my life. I hate her so much. All right. And on and on and on and on. Okay. I'll take you down here. I mean, you can pause this. You can have a look at how I've done this. I'll just show you here how this is all related and all these different emotions I've got going over here. All right. Just show you this here. All right. And I've written it all down and I've got it all out there. All right. So that is the crux of that part, for just highlighting exactly what is there for me. All right. Now I'm going to show you what we do when we move on to step 3. So this part of the system has been the current system breakdown of highlighting what is there for me related to this system of rumination. Okay. Now, if you do want to come and look at these rooms, I'll send you a link so you can look at them from a browser. I've got some notes here that I've moved in from ChatGPT just so you can have a look at these different notes here to explain how the different sort of sections work and what you're supposed to be doing. So those hopefully should be a bit helpful for you. But I want to just show you quickly before I leave this room something I found quite interesting. Now what I did was I went through with these emotions and I counted them. I tallied the emotions I was having all the way through, counted them all up. And then let me show you what I did over here. So I've created almost like a chart of the different emotions, right? And I've written a number underneath for how many times that emotion appears. And I found this really interesting and illuminating, because what it does is it shows you what your repetitive emotional states are that you're experiencing. And if you know that, it helps, because you can kind of dig in a bit more and think, oh, why am I feeling that so much? What's that all about? It just helps you zone in. Do you know what I mean? So you can kind of target in on the things you need to work on. So overall, I had 10 cases of resentment. When I looked at all of those repetitive thought patterns, all of those triggers, okay, resentment came up 10 times. And I've given it a big red symbol there just to show that it's so prevalent. The orange ones, the orange symbols, are to show that they're almost kind of like medium level emotions I need to deal with. But as you can see, I've got regret is big, self-disgust, hurt, number 5, hurt, okay, yearning, sadness, fear. Gives you a really good overall picture of the emotional content that is underlying this issue for you. All right. Now, even the ones that have got a 1 or whatever, it's not to say that they're irrelevant, they're still important. But my top contenders are hurt, self-disgust, regret, and ding, number 1 contender is resentment. All right, so that's what I have to work on. And then over here, these ones with a red sort of first aid sign are ones that are, you could see as positive: affection, hope, empowerment, catharsis, relief, pride, calm. Can be useful because you can look at, oh, what are the sort of things that are causing me to feel relief? Maybe I need more of those. Anyway, that's not essential, guys, but I just found that to be quite interesting and useful. Okay, so the way I've structured this now is more of a kind of horizontal flow here, with the first part, define the problem, which, as you know, is how can I stop ruminating on the past and stay present and focused. So I've used this kind of metaphor of, it's like a kind of Dungeons and Dragons type metaphor of someone that's trying to craft a tool to go out and slay some monsters. And this guy, his tool is ineffective. You know, it's an axe or whatever, and he's tried to hit the skeleton and it's broken, right? So whatever it is that he's currently doing is ineffective. So I wanted to use this image to show that, okay? And then just moving on to the next part of the process here, which is the current system breakdown that I mentioned earlier. And the way I've envisaged this is this guy, he's kind of taking apart the tool to see what it's made of. Like I said, this part of the process is trying to kind of pick everything to pieces to understand what's actually there in order to, at a later stage, be able to construct something more efficient. So this, I like this image. You know, I've used this, it's sort of like a mining kind of metaphor or whatever. Yeah, as you can see, he's got all of the different parts here in front of him and he's examining them. All right. And then in the next part of the process, we have this highlighting and questioning beliefs and assumptions, okay, regarding those fundamental parts that we've already outlined. Okay, so I've got this image of a forge. It's taking those parts there, it's kind of melting down what's there, and it's throwing it into the forge in order to kind of reconstruct it. So in this stage, everything is kind of being put into the forge, ready to be cast anew in the next stage where we investigate the first principles, all right? And then the next part of the process, what we're going to do is we're going to forge something new using fundamental truths or first principles. So as you can see here, we've got a nice image of him taking something out of the furnace and constructing something new to work with, all right, to build a new tool. And then eventually we've got rebuild from the ground up. See, he's taking these first principles and he's hammering a new tool that he can use to go out into the world and to carry out that action. And then test and apply the new model, hopefully build a new axe that can smash some skeletons. All right. So that's test and apply the new model, which in this case is the new axe. In my case will be the new value system that I'll be going out into the world with. So just to show you there, that's a fun, I like to create these metaphors using images. Images are powerful. You know, if you can assign images to things, it really helps. So this part of the process, guys, that we're going through here now is we're looking at our beliefs, and the way that I've sort of outlined these beliefs here is I've used the repetitive thought patterns that we had before, and I've used those to extract beliefs because really that's what they are. When you look at these repetitive thought patterns, you can see the beliefs inherent in them quite easily. So for example, so as you remember from before, we had, what would I say if I saw her again? Okay. And then we've got, I'd tell her what happened. Does she even know? So say coming from that, that's the thought pattern. So how do we extract a belief from that? All right. If she knew, she would feel regret or sympathy. That's what underlies that thought for me. That's the belief that I have. The belief that I have is, if she did know, she would feel sympathy for me. All right. So I'm extracting that belief there. Okay. Remember, then I had, oh, I'd be loving if I bumped into her. That would feel the best. So what makes me think that? Why am I thinking that that would be the best, to be loving or magnanimous if I bumped into her? Well, I've managed to highlight that it's because, for me, it's the safest approach to avoid future drama. That's what I believe. I believe that if I was nice to her when I saw her, that would make me safer. She'd be less likely to hate me, her son would be less likely to hate me, and I'd feel less threatened, all right? Or I'd take a deep breath and walk away. That would make me look like I've grown loads. What belief can I extract from that? Well, choosing not to engage makes you look mature, doesn't it? And well-rounded. It also makes you feel a sense of pride and stops the other person from thinking even less of you. So we're really digging in now, and this is where we're doing the work now. Okay, this is when we're starting to pick things apart and we're going to start to really make progress. So that's what you do. You work down this list here of repetitive thought patterns and you extract the beliefs. And let me just show you an example of how I've done that, of how I've kind of dug into one of these beliefs even more, and I've extracted first principles. So what I've done here, right now, what we're doing is we're carrying out this step 3, all right? We've outlined the entire system and what's there in terms of the repetitive thought cycles, the triggers, the emotions. Now we're highlighting and questioning our beliefs and our assumptions regarding those fundamental parts. And you can always come back here and you can have a look at some of these elements here I've created just to give me some pointers on how to do that. So we're asking, is it actually true? True. We're uncovering the mental wiring we've been following unconsciously. What function does this belief serve? It can reveal biases, habitual thinking we may have, or where we're using an emotional type of logic. What ideas have I already taken for granted? What assumptions do I have that I haven't actually tested? Is this belief I have aligned with my core values? What fundamental truth underpins this belief? What's untested? What do I believe about this? Sometimes the truth that we need to get at, the first principle, is kind of almost buried inside the belief in a distorted form. So as you can see, we're going to go in and we're going to extract some first principles from these beliefs, and we're going to look at ways that we can just kind of restructure them or completely overwrite them with some really, really nice kind of principles and values that we can use moving forward that are a lot more healthy. Is this belief objectively true? All right, so that's just to show you that part of the process that we're on here. Okay. And again, we just transferred over the repetitive thought cycles from stage 2, and we've used those to extract beliefs. So let me show you how it's done. So down here, we've got this one. I didn't deserve this. They ganged up on me. So this is this idea that at work, all these people that got together that decided to sort of tell the manager what I'd been saying, the inappropriate jokes I'd made. I hadn't propositioned anyone or anything like that. I'd just made some stupid jokes. Like I say, I've got a bit of a sexual sense of humour, and I just made some jokes around the wrong people. They didn't appreciate it. So this idea, I didn't deserve this, they ganged up on me. Inherent in that is the belief they were mean and uncaring. That's how I feel. With these, you have to dig into the feeling behind them. You have to almost sort of drill into them in your mind a little bit more to extract what's there for you. And then just stream of consciousness, just write what else kind of comes out there. What other beliefs do I have about this, about them ganging up on me? Well, they weren't even acting with integrity. It was almost like this pack mentality, when you're at school and everyone gets together to dob someone in. I remember I did it when I was at school. A few of us got together because there was this weird kid that went around grabbing people and just saying sexual weird things, and we kind of all ganged up on him and dobbed him into the teacher. And I remember feeling almost a little bit, don't know, it felt good to be a part of like the in-group that was doing that, if you know what I mean. I don't think there was particularly like a moral sensitivity to it or sensibility or whatever. So then there's this idea. Some of them didn't even care about my jokes. They just took a disliking to me for other reasons and jumped on the bandwagon. It's almost like I can't get my head around the fact that someone would get that offended by something like that. It was more just like kind of all said the vicar to the nun or said the actor to the bishop type thing. I did make a joke stupidly about periods at one point. We were working on the ladies' products section, and I asked a couple of the girls there a stupid question about periods or something because I thought it would be funny. Pretty ridiculous. Again, I just don't know where it came from. I don't know what possessed me to think that would be a funny thing to say. I was just in this mode of making those jokes all the time, and I just forgot myself, and pretty fucked up. If they accepted it from him, they should have accepted it from me. If they didn't, it must mean I'm flawed or unlikable. Like I say, there was another guy there who was worse than me, and they just giggled and laughed it off. With me, no, they didn't. For whatever reason, didn't work for me. They should have approached me first. That would have been the decent thing to do. All right? So we've got all of these beliefs now, all stemming from this repetitive thought cycle pattern that I've had. I didn't deserve this. They ganged up on me. So I've drilled into it, And what I've done as I've gone through this part of the process, step 3, is I've actually started to extract the first principles as I go, so I don't actually have to come back and do it all over again at the end. So just to sort of give you an idea, the first principle, that's the part where we extract the truths that are behind some of these beliefs. And I've got a few notes here that you can look at. So you're identifying assumptions that can be rewritten as axioms. Every belief rests on an invisible axiom. In step 3, you're asking, what do I assume about myself, others, or the world? And in step 4, this step, we're trying to say, what is an unshakable principle that I can operate from instead? Like a new principle. Something that could be applied to any situation, that any person that could use, that always remains true, that isn't just based on some kind of bias, all right? So, for example, we've got this belief, I'm disgusting. We've identified the hidden assumption as I must be pure to be loved. And then we've extracted the first principle as love is not earned by moral purity. So that's quite helpful. That's just to give you a quick idea what we're doing now in steps 3 and 4. All right. So let me show you how I've extracted the first principles. I did it quite intuitively. And I just thought to myself, what would be a more healthy way to go through the world? And as I did this more and more, I started coming up with like a theme almost for some of these first principles for myself. And a lot of it seemed to center around staying aligned with almost like an inner value system that allows me to behave in an appropriate way and also not to be defined by other people's views of me. So I've got this. I don't have to like other people's behavior, but it's useful to understand how I may have contributed towards it. So you can see this theme of accountability here, all right, starting to take root. So here we've got all of this victim mentality stuff, like, oh, calling someone names behind their back is just childish. They were calling me weird behind my back, according to my ex. They weren't acting with integrity. Through a pack mentality. See, it's all like me, poor me, they ganged up on me. None of it is really looking at taking responsibility for any of my actions. Okay. Now, a good principle, an underlying first true principle that anyone could use here would be this. You know, I don't have to like the way they behaved. You know, I can't force myself to like it and think, yeah, well done, good on them. Could do, but I'm not there yet. It's useful to understand how I may have contributed towards it. So anyone could say that that would be a good way to go forward, all right? Calling someone names behind their back is just childish. Well, that's not objectively true. Some people might say it is, some people might say it isn't. If they accepted it from him, they should have accepted it from me. Well, says who? You see, it's not a fundamental foundational truth that I can work with. It's something that's very biased, based on my own beliefs, based on my own fears and my own needs. Okay, it's selfish, it's not selfless. And as we get into this more and more, you'll see how a lot of these first principles have got more of a selfless, all-encompassing element to them, which comes outside of ego a little bit more and kind of considers taking responsibility and viewing things from other people's perspective. All right. And once I realized that, I was able to use that almost like a guiding force to keep writing them. So I've put them in this nice orangey kind of color here because I'm still thinking of the idea of the forge, putting things in a forge and, you know, kind of smelting down these assumptions and extracting the ore here of these first principles. What else have we got? I can't control other people's behaviors towards me, but I can reduce the likelihood of alienation by speaking and acting in a socially acceptable manner. Now that is more foundational, right? And that, it feels better to me. And as you get into this, you feel it more. That feels better to me, then, oh, they weren't acting with integrity. It was a pack mentality. It gave them a sense of belonging. Do you know what I mean? It's just a little bit immature and a little bit kind of, it has the same energy that caused the problem in the first place. But that is saying that I can let go of control. Ultimately, people are going to behave how they want. But I can control my actions. I don't have to try and control their actions, but as long as I act with integrity and I act in a socially acceptable manner, I can at least decrease the likelihood of this type of shit happening, right? People use their interpretations of my actions to construct a narrative regarding my character. These interpretations are based on their own experiences, biases, values, and agenda. As such, I can't control them, but I can control my own actions. Similar to the other one, you know, and definitely very, very similar specific themes will start to arise. Again, this is letting go of control, of being able to control other people's opinions, but acknowledging that I can control my actions. Expecting consistency of behaviour from others gives a false, I suppose to say false, sense of security. I aim instead to be consistent in my own behaviour. Practicing right speech and right behaviour in social settings creates harmony and helps me to integrate rather than risk alienation. Can you see how that is more fundamental? How it feels better and how it's a safer, more empowering way of moving through the world. Rather than pointing the finger externally, it's coming back to the truth of I can choose my behaviour. The truth is I can't control other people's behaviour. That's a fundamental truth. It's also a fundamental truth that I can control my own behaviour. You know, people might say, well, you can't always, we all make mistakes. Yeah, sure, we all do and we all learn. But ultimately, I can learn to control my behaviour and I can make a distinction between right and wrong in certain social settings. You see? It's empowering. If I instill this in me, I can be a lot less likely to have the same things happen. So then once I've done that, all right, so I've gone through, I've extracted all of the beliefs here, and then I've dug in and I've used those to create these first principles. And then what I do is I take these and I move them over here. And this is what you can do, guys. Get a pen and a pad if we don't have VR. Make some columns. Up at the top here, I've got the belief. So if we look at the one that I was just looking at a minute ago, they were mean and uncaring, all right? And then I pop it there. So each belief and all of the associated first principles are listed underneath here, all in columns, all right? And we go along like this, and this is how we structure it. Each time we have a belief, we take it and its associated first principles and we line them up along here, and we keep lining them up, all right? And as you can see, we do end up with quite a lot. Let's do a few more. Not going to go through them all. So let's go into this one. It's quite a personal one, quite a tough one, this one. I'm some kind of freak. What have we got with this one? Only freaks get treated this way. Having groups of people get together to get rid of them. It's kind of like how it makes you feel, when you've had like a group of people all gang up to get rid of you. It makes you feel like you're the freaky weirdo on the block that people are just like have to get rid of. Do you know what I mean? Like chase out of the village with like pitchforks or something. Do you know what I mean? It was awful. It was absolutely traumatizing to have that happen, especially because I thought a lot of these people were actually all right with me and I was getting on with them, and all this was going on behind my back. They called me weird. That must mean I'm weird. Like when my ex told me that, like, oh, that's what they call you at work, it was like all of a sudden that was what I was to her at that point. Not this person that she'd been in a relationship with 4 years. This weirdo that could say that could share that information about her just like that and not even be considerate, that could make those jokes in front of these young girls, or we women rather. And yeah, I get it. They called me names behind my back. That's what happens to freaks, you know? It was cruel of her not to show care for me when she found out what they'd been saying. She knew me so well. She knew I wasn't a freak. She knew me for a long time. This is someone that said they loved me, said I was their soulmate, you know? This thing happens all of a sudden. I'm freaky bastard boy. That's hard. That's hard, especially again when I've based a lot of my self image on who she thinks I am. You know, I felt like I was a real piece of shit before she came along. And then she came along, told me she loved me. That enabled me to love myself. She then retracted that love, called me a freak, had me arrested, and now I'm no longer a lovable person. I'm a freak. Savage. My lack of discretion concerning humour made me vulnerable. That might be more of a first principle, actually. And there's this one. She found out what I truly was underneath the guise. See, there's already this underlying kind of belief I have that I am a freak, you know, based on stuff that's happened in the past, based on some of that fucking porn I was looking at, you know, some of that extreme, weird, friggin' porn. You watch enough of that stuff, it starts to seep into your self identity. I'm the sort of guy that gets off on this now. Do you know what I mean? Not good. They're pathetic. I was only joking around. How can they be that sensitive? Yeah, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of resentment. Do you know what I mean? I didn't mean anyone any harm. They were harmless jokes. They were silly, childish, toilet humour jokes. You know, I wasn't commenting on any of their bodies, although I did say something about periods. I was asking about periods, not their periods, but oh, it's bad. It's shameful. And if anyone that ever wants to employ me watches this video, I ain't gonna get employed. But do you know what? I'm from the Shia LaBeouf school, Shia LaBeouf or whatever. I've fallen from grace, man. I've hit rock bottom, and this is my way back. And this had to happen for me to truly grow and come back, because I didn't realize quite how messed up I was until this has happened to me. I didn't know I had the capacity to do this or to make jokes like that, but given the right environment, it came out. If they allowed him to joke like that but not me, then my jokes can't have been the problem. So again, this is down. I must be fundamentally broken in some way. If he got away with it and I didn't, I must be. It isn't about the jokes. It's about me, who I am at the core. You know, if that freaky bastard was accepted and I wasn't, then how fucked up does that make me? So you can see, right? This was hardcore, this one. So let's try and extract some first principles, right? As long as I'm making efforts to improve myself, I can integrate past mistakes as lessons and not continue to define myself by them. So here what we see is this idea of I'm trying to improve and I'm trying to become better by taking responsibility and saying I made mistakes. I'm not trying to hide behind being a victim, okay? And also, I'm not defining myself by these mistakes. That is a bad move. To define yourself by past mistakes is just creating more of the same problems. You know, if I decide I'm a freak and that's just who I am, that could quite easily just justify that type of behavior in the future. If I'm saying I've made mistakes and I've said things that have upset people, then I can actually own that, you know, and I can say I can change. And I'm not going to define myself by mistakes that I've made in the past, because that's just going to cause me more problems. It's going to mean that I'm more likely to get hurt again and I'm more likely to hurt other people again. See, that just feels more real, and feels like more something that's more fundamental that I can actually kind of use and integrate into my value system. I have the rest of my life starting from now to become the person I want to become. So I'm creating myself from this. I'm using the shit. I'm using all of these mistakes and all of this stuff that I've done to screw up to create something else. I don't need to label myself as the opposite of someone's negative judgments in order to defend myself. I just need to learn from the experience and take appropriate action. So, I don't need to try and find examples of why I'm not a freak and why I am a great guy and I did this in the past and I did that and I opened the door for this person or that person. Do you know what I mean? It's like I don't have to defend myself by trying to create a case as to why I'm not a freak. Because again, that's just not taking responsibility. You could say it's true that it's not the full picture. Of course, it never is. But again, it's just a way of deflecting. It's just a way of saying, not looking at a side of me that actually exists and did manifest. All right. So I don't need to turn all those tricks. I just need to learn and take action to grow. It's not always possible to know the specific factors and circumstances that cause events to transpire. Anyway, such knowledge is not needed in order for me to learn and grow. So this frees me from dwelling. It frees me from rumination because it's a truth. It isn't possible to always know all the factors. I could spend hours wondering why, you know, if he was accepted and I wasn't, then how messed up does that make me? Why did they allow him to joke but not me? No. Where am I going to get with that? It's just trying to discover something that can't be discovered. There's no point. It's not always possible to know, and it's not needed. I don't need to know in order to grow. I just need to know what happened, what I was thinking of, what I did that caused problems, and what I can do differently. It's forward thinking, okay? It's not endless self condemnation and obsession over needing to know all the time. It's just forward thinking. Absolute assertions regarding someone's character are an illusion. This frees me from internalizing other people's projections. However, this does not free me from acting with integrity and caution in social settings, especially amongst people I don't know. So this is a fundamental truth that you can't make absolute assertions about someone's character. It's a falsity. It is existentially a falsity to slap a label on someone and say that's what you are. Relatively speaking, you can say it's a truth for you that that's what you think of that person, that's how they made you feel. But to actually try and define someone as something, to define something that's constantly moving and changing, is an untruth, a fundamental untruth. And realizing how conceptual labels are and how they can't pin something that's much more complex down, it frees me from having to kind of internalize that label and think that's what I am. I know the truth that I can't be a word, I can't be a label, because that's just a noise I make with my throat or a thought I have. I'm still here. My beingness is still here, okay? But knowing that doesn't mean that's an excuse to not act in a certain way. Just because a label is false, it doesn't mean that there's no relative truth to why I may have been seen in a certain way. The relative truth is that if you act in certain unacceptable ways, people will think things about you, It's not true that you are those things, but it's certainly true that you will appear a certain way to them and they will interpret you in a certain way, all right? Jokes of a sexual nature are harmless to some, but make others feel uncomfortable. Do you see how that's the truth? Those jokes are harmless to some. You know, I could have been working in a different place and said that stuff and it would have been tame to some people. But there are many, many people out there that can feel very uncomfortable if someone makes a sexual joke. And I feel remorse for that, you know. And I wasn't able to as much before I went through this process. I was feeling shame more than remorse. Shame's a bit different. Shame's almost more like self-indulgent. I just regret it, you know. I regret the harm I did to them. Shame's more about, oh God, this is how it's made me feel. I feel so ashamed. No, I just feel shitty that I made someone feel uncomfortable to the point where they had to actually report me. Seeking to understand other people's motives or behaviour is a pointless endeavour. Yeah, again, similar to the other one up the top there. My self-identity is a conceptual construction. Therefore, I choose to construct it myself and not by using the artificial labels given by others. So this is helpful to me because what last thing I want to do is get caught in a shame spiral and labeling myself in a certain way, calling myself a certain thing. Again, it's self-indulgent. It doesn't help anyone to shame spiral. It doesn't help me to change. What helps me to change is realizing that my identity can be constructed in a healthy way by me and not by using these negative labels that are given to me. Okay, I can take stock of them, but I'm not going to use them to define myself. I'm going to be something else, something that I decide that's more healthy. I make efforts to stay away from people and situations that seem out of alignment with the values and ways of being that feel authentic. Some of these resonate with me more than others now when I look at them. What you find is as you go through this process, as you get further and further down the line, some of the earlier ones will still seem like they're a little bit kind of tinged with slightly not taking responsibility. I mean, even this one, if you look at it at its core, it's kind of saying that like their values were the problem, not me, you know. I just need to be around with people that enjoy perverse jokes. Mm, yeah, okay, you could say there's some truth to it, you know. I could have I could kind of say that yeah, I can find my tribe. I can just sit around being a freak all day and it'll be great. But that's not the sort of person I want to be, and it's not a bad one, but you know. So that's those, and then you whack them over in the big long list over here. Let's do one more, and then we'll move on. Right, so let's look at this one up here. I only told her because I was worried she already knew. Now, after it all kicked off and I got arrested and stuff, and I said to myself, well, oh, she should have appreciated the fact that I told her because I did the right thing. It was the right thing to tell her. But actually, the more I think about it, I wasn't trying to do the right thing. I wasn't telling her because I thought it was the right thing to do. I was telling her because I couldn't live with the fear of her finding out. You know, I couldn't spend every day worrying, thinking today's the day when I'll get a call. It was almost like I needed to get it out there so I didn't have to spend time worrying about it. You know, I think that was why I decided to tell her. I don't think I had some sense of morality about it because really, what did it do? All it did was cause her problems. I mean, there was nothing she could have done anyway. All it did was tell her something that pretty much just upset her. Whereas if I'd have never told her, either she never would have found out, or maybe she would have found out, but it wouldn't have made a difference. It really only made a difference to me, as far as I can tell. I didn't realise that at first. And she said something along those lines to me when she saw me that night. You only told me for this reason, or whatever. Another part of it is I think I just wanted to see her again. She'd been ignoring me. I wasn't harassing her like she said. I sent her a couple of emails. I phoned her a couple of times. I think I was just wanting her attention as well. I honestly thought we'd be able to work through it. I didn't realize it would spiral that much. But yeah, that took a lot for me to acknowledge that, because it was almost like the one thing that I had that I was holding on to. This fact that, oh, I'm a good person because I told her, you know, it made all my suffering seem worth it, and not just purely a result of my bad behavior. It was kind of like, I'm suffering because I chose to do the right thing. That's why I'm in this shit. Because when you do the right thing, sometimes things don't work out that well. It made me feel like I chose this rather than having it inflicted upon me. So, some first principles I took from this were, having acted selfishly doesn't mean I can't feel remorse and learn how to show up in the world with integrity in the future. Okay? It's accepting that, yeah, I made a mistake. Again, this is a theme I keep coming back to. If I don't own up to it, and if I don't acknowledge it, I can't change it. I can't grow from it. If you don't take responsibility, you can't change. You just stay stuck. I don't need to search for examples of good behavior in order to be free from shame. I just need to make the choice to let go of feelings that don't serve my future evolution. That's what a lot of this is about, and this is what this is helping me to do. I was in a lot of shame before this, a lot of resentment. After doing this whole process, I feel a lot more empowered. I'm not out of the woods yet, but I have a roadmap. Regretting past choices doesn't change them. Instead, I extract the lessons and aim to do better moving forward. You're seeing the theme here, right? It doesn't matter now what I did or didn't do. I only look back in order to learn, then I move on. I'm not quite sure about that one again. I think it does matter what I did. I think it will always matter. And I think I will always live with it. I will always have to live with that regret of what I did and how I behaved. And I think saying it doesn't matter doesn't really sit right with me. But I can see what I'm getting at. I'm just trying not to get too stuck on in the past. Acting out of survival and fear is a natural human response, and I no longer shame myself for it. So that's kind of me saying, when I told her, I was in a state of fear, like I'd literally just had to leave my job because of what had happened. And I was nervous, I had this whole thing, all these people kind of getting me sacked from work. And then the thought of then having to worry about whether she was going to find out or not, whether she already knew, it was just too much for me. So I was in a very emotional survival state. That's what I'm trying to get across. I'm trying to alleviate my sense of shame here a little bit to make it a bit easier for myself. I'm having compassion, and that's okay. It's okay to have compassion for myself, because we all make mistakes, and that's not to absolve myself. That's just to sort of say, you're human, man. You screwed up and you were in a really awful situation and you were freaking out, and you did the thing that you felt you needed to do to alleviate your pain. And that, although that was selfish, it was human. Okay. So again, having some compassion for yourself is always a nice thing to do as well. It's finding that balance, I suppose, between taking responsibility and having compassion for yourself. So that's really all I'm going to show you on this one here. And then I'm going to jump forward and I'm going to show you what it looks like once we've finished this whole process. Okay, so once again, what I did was I went through each of these beliefs, dug into them, and extracted principles that are a bit more kind of stable in terms of, they're true pretty much for everyone. They're not so much coloured with fear or bias or from my own perspective. They're more fundamental to the human experience, okay? Things like, fear of violence is a natural and protective response, not something to be ashamed of. Most people, I mean, again, with this one, someone else might come along and say, well, actually, no, that isn't a fundamental principle. Because, yeah, I think that fear of violence is something to be ashamed of. I don't feel that you should be ashamed. I feel like you should be ashamed for being scared to stand up for yourself. Let me just reiterate the fact that these aren't always the same as first principles in the sense of being absolute fundamental truths. They're more, a lot of them are subjective truths that I'm using that help me to create a new, healthy value system that works for me and who I am and how I want to move through the world. So don't necessarily think that you always have to sort of unearth some absolute scientific fundamental kind of truth. A lot of them are just things that you kind of resonate with, you see. Like choosing not to escalate a situation is a form of strength and wisdom, not cowardice. Someone else might say, no, you're a coward, if you walk away from escalation. But again, I would still argue that has a tinge of the unconditional about it. I'd say in general, it's wise to walk away from confrontation when it's escalating. And it is a form of strength a lot of the time because, it's weakness to think you have to prove yourself. So they're edging towards fundamental truths, but a lot of the time they are subjective in nature. Okay, so we've got them all here. And as you can see, there is a lot. Let me just give you a little idea here of how many we've got. All right, a lot. Like I said, we're talking about our fundamental operating system here. We're not playing. And this is just for how do I stop ruminating? There's a lot more about my psyche I can kind of dig into. But funnily enough, I covered a lot with this. Just from why am I ruminating on the past, I've actually got to some fundamental core biases I had that I was operating on that were causing me pain in life. It's been incredible. I can't stress enough how helpful this process is. And if you follow it through, you really, really can build something a lot better for yourself. So, what do we do with all of this stuff? Because you stand here and you look at it and you go, okie dokie. Do I just start reading this stuff until it somehow kind of sticks? Right, there's a process. So, what we do is we use the wonderful power of artificial intelligence to give us a little helping hand, because why not? Okay, there's no shame in it. And I'll show you how I did that. Here are the categories I came up with. All right, so we've got judgment, projection, and perception, love, connection, and emotional hunger, responsibility, guilt, and growth, emotional mastery, boundaries, autonomy, and power, forgiveness, empathy, compassion, and letting go, self-image, values, and identity. All right? How did I get these? Let me show you. I took photos, okay? I went into my virtual reality headset and I took a photo going along, and I managed to get photos of most of these. Probably about 7 photos I took going all the way along in virtual reality. Just went into an option on my headset, took photos. I then uploaded those photos to ChatGPT. If you're just using a pen and paper, take photos of the lists that you've come up with and then upload the photos into ChatGPT, and I'll show you the prompts I used. You don't have to use ChatGPT for this, but it helped me save some time. So this is what I've written. Forget the dark orange boxes at the top of each column. I've said that because those are the beliefs that I'm basing the first principles on. Each other box is a first principle. Don't worry about repeating them here, but based on them, can you recommend some categories? Yes, it can. And what it did was it gave me 7 categories. It helpfully managed to discern the text in each of the boxes, and it gave me a category for each. Look at that. My sense of justice and self-worth is independent of external validation. That comes under self-image and identity, like all those do. Some of them it paraphrased, that's fine. If you wanted to, you could just use this list. It does a pretty good job of paraphrasing some of them. I mean, some of mine are actually quite long-winded. Responsibility, guilt and growth, judgment, projection and perception, and so on. And I've got 7. And just to make sure there weren't any further categories, because that was only based on one photo, right? It only took that data from one photo I took. I've put 2 more photos I've uploaded, and I've put, okay, do the same for these. Don't create new domains if you don't need to. Are there new ones? I'm asking you, are there any new categories based on these 2 photos? Yes, I've reviewed the new set of principles and they fit beautifully into your existing 7 domain framework. No need to add more, but a few principles could live in more than one domain. Genius. Right, so then what I've done is after I uploaded all the other photos, I've put, and you don't need to do this part of the process, but I've put, let's create an ultimate list based on the items from each of your last 3 responses. Let's start with category 1. I've asked it to compile from all the photos I've uploaded, compile into sort of super lists for each category. So self-image and identity, it's looked up at its last responses, where it's kind of, these here were just based on one photo, if you get what I mean. Down here I've said, no, take all the elements from every photo and put them in a super list. So it's done that. Again, you could actually save these and you could just use these if you really wanted to. Okay, I haven't really done much with them, but it was quite a useful exercise and I might do something with them at some point. But I was just really trying to get the categories, and then once I've got the categories, then what I'm going to do then is I'm going to come over here and I'm going to start grabbing first principles from 1 or 2 so you can get what I'm talking about. So maintaining boundaries is essential for my well-being and mental health. So that obviously goes in the, where is it? Boundaries, autonomy and power, all right? So I grab it and I whack it over boundaries, autonomy and a power. What next? Each individual is responsible for their own healing and growth. So I'll take that and I'm going to, oh yeah, responsibility, guilt and growth. Whack that in there. Compassion includes maintaining boundaries and does not require continued engagement with hostility. Again, boundaries. Where else? Let me try and get a different one in a different category. My identity is mine alone. That goes in self-image and identity. So these are the main areas that cover the flavor of what I've got in these first principles. These are the main areas that I'm needing to kind of work on. And they really do make sense. I'm going to put this in self-identity, values and self-image. Because I've got to be honest with you, I have a real problem with boundaries, autonomy and power. Because I'm basing my value system and my identity a lot of the time on what other people are thinking about me, or I'm not having boundaries. I'm people pleasing and going along with idiots that make silly jokes and thinking it's funny for to do the same. You know, I'm expressing emotions healthily is important, but true closure comes from within. This gives you autonomy. What I mean, autonomy seems like a massive theme for me that I'd never thought of before ChatGPT mentioned it. You don't have autonomy when you're always being led by other people and thinking that you have to fit in, or thinking that you have to adhere to, control their view of you, or their opinion of you is how you need to think about yourself. That gives you no autonomy. I center my actions in my values from now on, not outcomes. See how that gives me more autonomy? I can't control outcomes, but I can control my actions. That gives me my autonomy back. Huge. Same with self-image, values, and identity. I was having a massive problem, massive defining myself by other people's viewpoints of me. My sense of dignity and empowerment is restored through self-respect and growth, not through retaliation. Acting in accordance with an inner set of values is a reliable way to maintain a positive self-image, despite how people may react to me. And this is a core realization I've had from doing this work, is that as long as I act with integrity in line with my values, that's all I can control. But I have to be consistent with that. And I can't be pulled this way and that by other people and needing to please other people or make them see me in a certain way. I just have to know how I need to behave to not cause myself or anyone suffering. And I can only do my best of that. And that's a learning process. It's huge. I never saw this stuff. I never ever saw this stuff until I took these beliefs and I looked at them and I realized where I was going wrong, and I realized the unhealthy assumptions I had and how I was pinning my very identity on how other people were seeing me. Even like when my ex said to me, "Oh, they call you weird at work," and she said, "I don't know you anymore." I said, "Do you still love me?" She said, "I don't even know you." That was devastating to me because I loved myself through her eyes. I could only love myself when she loved me. And as soon as she turned around and said, "You're a weirdo," I trusted her. I trusted her opinion of me. So when she said that, that's what I was. I didn't see how much that affected me and why it affected me until I did this work. And then I realized I don't have to be defined by what she thinks of me. And I'm not saying she's wrong to think of me like that. I'm just saying that it only matters how I show up and how I act, and if I behave with integrity. And if I do that and someone still calls me a weirdo, I can live with that. So go through all these. It doesn't take that long. It looks like it will, but it really doesn't. And don't try and be too neat with it as well. I'll show you what I mean, Mind you, that doesn't apply to you if you're using pen and paper. If you're using pen and paper, it's going to be a bit more irritating because you're going to have to literally write stuff in other sections, which is why get yourself a VR headset. Yeah, just chuck them in like that, see? Get them all in there, guys. And now what I'll do is I'll take you and I'll show you the finished product and what everything looks like after you've done this whole process. And then we'll get this bad boy wrapped up. Okay, so as you can see, it's looking a bit better now. And what I've done here is I've taken all of the categories, all right? Boundaries, autonomy and power, judgment, projection, perception, and I've put them all in the corresponding categories, nicely color coded, so we can go through and we can see which category each first principle is related to. And I've also created some cool images because I love an image. So for emotional maturity, I added a couple of my own categories too that the AI didn't give me because it just made sense to. So emotional maturity, like this image of a tree in a storm being shaken and blown, but it's sturdy, its roots go deep, so it's not being shaken or it's not being blown over. So I've got all of me first principles for that one. Boundaries, autonomy, and power. We've got like a cleric in the middle of a flaming circle. That's them. Judgment, projection, and perception made me think of the scene from, oh God, I should know this, Return of the Jedi, where he's fighting himself in the tunnel in a Dagobah. Could be Empire Strikes Back. No, Empire Strikes Back, and he has to fight himself. And I thought about that because really that's what projection kind of is, isn't it? When you're projecting your own insecurities or biases onto other people. So really you're only fighting yourself. When you think you're fighting other people or you're judging other people, you're actually judging yourself. So this image kind of acknowledges that, when he's kind of standing up to his own kind of shadow self, he's realizing that his projections are really his own shadow that he has to kind of confront. So I liked that anyway, and I thought that was pretty sick. This, I did change this, and I'll show you later what I changed this image to because it wasn't sitting well with me. But we've got love, connection, and emotional hunger. And that's how I envisaged that to begin with. Protecting myself and others. I added this category myself because a lot of first principles, and this is my favorite category actually, sits the best with me. And there was a lot of stuff in there about just needing to look out for people and make sure they don't get hurt. So I've got this badass knight here protecting these villagers. I tried the hardest to get ChatGPT to put the villagers behind my shield. It wouldn't do it. It kept putting them in front of my shield, but it doesn't matter. It still works. Social skills. I added that one. Got some dudes in a tavern there having a good time. Forgiveness, empathy, compassion, and letting go. Two generals on a battlefield making friends. Responsibility, guilt, and growth. I've got a knight surrendering his arms to a cursed hag and refusing to fight. Taking responsibility. This is my favourite image. Self-image, values, and identity. I love this idea of this kind of statue building himself. He's not relying on anyone else to create himself. He's taking responsibility for actually sculpting who he is. So I thought that was a pretty awesome image. And having an image associated with these just helps you recall them. Memory's important. Otherwise, it's all just a big word salad. All right. So then over here, we go on to our next section, which is rebuilding from the ground up. And that's really what we're doing now. We're forging something new with these new first principles, a new code, a new value system. All right. It's beautiful. This is the good stuff. If you've managed to get through everything up until now, this is where things get really awesome. And I've got all of the categories here just waiting to have something moved over. And the way I've done this, guys, is, we can't realistically work on all this stuff at once. So what I've done for each section, go through, have a look, read through them, and just maybe extract one or two that you think are incredibly prevalent, or maybe encapsulate the core of some of the ideas that you've kind of gathered, some of the principles here. So for me, with self-image, values, and identity, the core seemed to have been this whole thing of allowing other people to determine how I view myself. And as long as I can kind of find one or two here that allude to that, I'm all right. So this one here, I love this one. I'm really proud of this one. My identity is no longer externally derived, but internally applied. Man, that is just pure awesomeness, right? So I just take it over Here, I'll show you. I'll just leg it over here and I'll put it in the right section. And I might grab a couple more. And then I'll go through. So what am I looking at from here? Responsibility, guilt, and growth. So this is my biggest section, and I'm really happy with that. And the biggest learning experience that I had from all of this was how I wasn't taking responsibility. I was caught in resentment, blame, victim identity, and that wasn't helping me to grow and move forward. All right. Shame, all that stuff. None of it was good for me. And this has been a really beautiful realization that has helped me so much already. And it just feels better in my body, you know, taking responsibility because it cares for other people. You know, I behaved in that way. I made those jokes because I didn't care enough about the other person. I cared more about making people laugh and fitting in and being accepted, which is ironic because it was the thing that got me alienated more than anything else. But that's all I gave a shit about, you know, and I have to take responsibility for that and say, I needed to care about that person, even though they weren't speaking to me and I was bitter about the relationship and how it had ended. That's no excuse to make jokes or say things, personal things to that person. I should have protected her, but I didn't protect her. I was selfish and I have to take responsibility for that. And even though she behaved in a way that got me in a lot of trouble and put me in this situation, I don't have to feel good about that. I don't have to accept that or say that was, I feel that that was an appropriate way for her to act. But that doesn't stop me from acknowledging that that was the only way she could have acted. And when people are in a survival situation and they're incredibly emotional, they will act in those ways. And all I can do is try and limit the possibility for that to happen to other people and to me because I played a part in that. I did. And when you put people in a situation where they're traumatized and emotional, they can do things like that. All right. And I have to take responsibility. And doing that helps me to move past resentment. Let me just try and find a good example of, yeah, like, and some of these are more advanced than some of the earlier first principles that I was writing down, which were things like, oh, I just need to find people that share my value system. And, you know, oh, I can't force myself not to feel resentment for people when they behave in ways that victimize me or whatever. So if you look at this, what appears as an overreaction to me could feel like a justified or reasonable response to someone else. I always choose the interpretation that suits me because I inhabit this body. This is a result of being a thing in relation to other things, pitting my needs against theirs. It feels nicer to me when mine get met, in the moment at least, but there's often a price to pay. So it's empowering to take responsibility for selfish actions that lead to dishonourable and unkind behaviour. Some actions cannot and should not be excused. We may be hurting, we may be scared, but if integrity fails, what are we? It's all we have. From now on, I act only in accordance with values I've tailored to protect myself and others from harm. Now, that, even reading that out, fucking heals my soul. You know, and that's the thing about a first principle. When you read it out and when you see it there in front of you, it's like staring into a baby angel's eyes or something. You know what I mean? It's just beautiful because it destroys my ego and it makes me feel so good because it makes me feel empowered. It makes me feel like I can do better. I can grow. I can use all this shit to grow myself and to do better and to be a better person, to stop people from getting hurt. I don't need to put someone else down, belittle them, or dishonor their name in order to deal with feelings of grief, hurt, or abandonment. From now on, I respect and honor people regardless of how I feel they're treating me. This doesn't mean I have to be in their presence or like their behavior, but it no longer serves as an excuse to compromise acting with integrity. So I just wanted to sort of zone in on that section a bit, just to show you the power of this process and where it takes you. It took me to responsibility, whereas I hadn't taken a lot before. I mean, I'd had moments where I was like, oh, I brought this on myself or whatever, but they were few and far between, and I just kept falling back on resentment again and again. So grab one or two from each of these sections that you want to work on, and then you can work on those, come back, grab a couple more, but don't bite off more than you can chew all in one go. Just take a couple from each section that really resonate with you, and then I'll show you what that looks like. So when you've got it all sorted and you've grabbed a few from each section, it should look something like this. So sometimes I've just grabbed one. For this section, I've got 4. For this section, I've got 3. And I can kind of manage these as like a starting point, all right? Just a few for there. And this is kind of what this looks like. And just to give you a helpful comparison here. So say we have here boundaries, autonomy, and power. And this is what I've grabbed. I can feel hurt by people's actions without needing to punish them. This is based on this idea of wanting to like give her a piece of my mind if I ever see her, because she needs to know how much she hurt me. So I've created this way where we can have a look and see a comparison between the first principles and the almost kind of shadow version of that principle before we actually did the work. All right, so let's start with this one. And just to say, we've got an image as well here for the previous, almost unhealthy belief that is like, the opposite of this image we've got here. So in this one, he's got this flame wall around him, protecting him from these imps. And in this one, they're kind of overrunning him. So I can feel hurt by people's actions without needing to punish them. Like I said, to begin with, I was having all of these feelings like, I need to give her a piece of my mind in order to feel like a sense of justice has been renewed, because it just seems so unfair. And this was the belief here: if someone behaves in a way I deem to be unjust, the only way I can resolve my resentment and sense of injustice is to give it to them straight. All right, so that's the opposite version of this nice, healthy new first principle we've got. My power lies not in controlling others' behavior, but in choosing my response to it. As opposed to, I react emotionally to the behavior of others rather than wait and choose my response. So as you can see, this is a lot more empowering, where I'm actually choosing my own behavior rather than being triggered. I'm more responsive rather than reactive. This is another one I really like because it's short and it gets to the point and it encapsulates a lot. I center my actions in values, not outcomes. Right, so I'm not so fussed on, well, ultimately I'd love every outcome to serve me. That would be beautiful, but life doesn't always act that way, go that way. So all I can do is center my actions around this kind of inner value system without obsessing too much on those outcomes, because as long as I do that and I'm aligned with my values, even if the outcome isn't something intended or something that I want, I still know that I did my best and I acted in line with my values. So, and the opposite is just the opposite statement. I center my actions in outcomes, not values. So before it was just trying to control the external world all of the time, really, and just acting spontaneously in the spur of the moment, not really based on any kind of inner system or compass, just probably usually just based on assumptions or projections. Tying my identity to other people's perceptions makes me vulnerable to factors outside my control, and that's quite similar. And the opposite is I view myself in line with how others view me. So I don't have an opinion of myself independent from other people's opinion of me. And this is acknowledging that tying my identity to other people's perceptions, that makes me vulnerable to things I can't actually control. I can have compassion for troubled people and work on seeing their beauty and potential without needing to fix them or engage with them. Before I couldn't stand the idea that someone might dislike me and I needed to solve that at all costs. And then I had this unhealthy, almost kind of holier than thou urge to need to be the one to kind of fix people. I see myself as being the one that can reach through to people with kindness or compassion or whatever, and sometimes it's just not possible. And most of the time it comes from an unhealthy urge to kind of control deep down, or control the way people viewed me, rather than this idea I had that I was doing a good thing that was almost like a mask, probably most of the time. Yeah, and here it is. I can't have anyone disliking me. If they don't like me, I have to fix this at all costs. Okay? Because again, I view myself in line with how they view me. If they dislike me, I dislike myself. Right, so that's that one. So over here we've got love, connection, and emotional hunger. I couldn't quite get that one right with that couple walking off, but I thought it was funny anyway. And maybe it's a metaphor for something. I wish more couples would walk along like that. So I've got, sometimes we can be so wrapped up in our own needs that we don't have the capacity to acknowledge or understand someone else's. Over time, this erodes relationships. So this is actually more related to problems I had within my relationship with this person. And we can compare that to, here's the other version of him sitting, looking really sad on the bench. Why are they so unable to meet my needs? They're so self-absorbed. They want me to listen to them, but they never care about me. Me. Easy to be so obsessed on getting your needs met that you don't stop to think about the other person's. Take the lead. Listen to that person. Try and find out what they want. Just put your needs to one side. See it as being the bigger person if you need to. My ability to love is a reflection of my own inner capacity and something I give freely, regardless of circumstance. I don't have to like someone's behaviour or stick around to endure rudeness or abuse, but none of these things are an excuse to remove my love. As opposed to, my love is completely conditional on how someone else treats me or how I view them. So this is a bit of a Jesus tier one here, but it's always good to have one high one or two to aim for. So this is me just saying, like, I want to be able to love regardless. I don't have to stick around and put up with shit, but I'm not going to remove my love from someone just because they can't treat me in a certain way. Maybe they're in pain. Maybe they're not in a certain place in their life where they're able to, behave in a certain way or in a way that's aligned with my values. Not to call their behavior right or wrong or anything like that, but just say it doesn't align. And it doesn't mean that I'm going to hate them. It doesn't mean that I'm going to badmouth them when they're not around. I'm going to make jokes about them. So that's that one. Emotional maturity, as opposed to the tree staying still, it's breaking in a rather weird way that doesn't really match physics, but there you go. So we've got, my emotions are valid, but how they're expressed. No, my emotions are valid, but I choose how they're expressed. Always responding rather than reacting, as opposed to, my emotions control me completely and I react without thinking. Emotions are signals, not definitions of my character or worth. My emotions completely define who I am and determine my worth. So I did this as a useful way to compare for you there. Judgment, projection, and perception. So we got that. We've got the opposite image of him having his hand cut off by his sort of dark shadow self. My reaction to others can serve as a guide to understanding myself better, helping me to align with the values that boost my self-worth. This is just acknowledging that a judgment of someone else or a reaction to them is pretty much always a projection. And if we look at those projections or the ways we interpret things, that will usually give us something we can work on about ourselves. So that's opposed to, I've got a good intuition for how people are. My judgments are always accurate. I mean, if they have bad vibes, I just don't want to be around them. So it's this kind of idea that you objectively know who people are and what they're about. You know, you just understand that person's just a dick and that's all there is to it. But it's not looking at why you've decided to label them that way. It's this whole idea of whatever the self describes the self. It's a hard one for people to get their head around. I posted it on a comment section. I think it was on the Guardian website at one point, and I got some pretty bad backlash for that. For anyone stuck in like a victim mode, it's the worst thing that you can say to them, really. And I remember in my old relationship, sometimes I'd say to my ex, oh, that's just a projection. No one wants to hear that when you're in an argument, because it's kind of like absolving yourself of responsibility. So again, telling someone else they're projecting isn't always helpful, but you can look at your own projections, definitely. Responsibility and growth, the opposite of that. So originally, this is the person cursing the beautiful woman and then turning her into this abomination. So blaming or shaming myself is an unproductive activity I no longer choose to embody, as opposed to blaming and shaming myself is the only way I can feel better about what happened. I need to be punished. So, you know, again, it's taking the responsibility to say I no longer am going to blame and shame myself, because again, it's just, all it's saying is I couldn't do anything about this. This is just the way I am. I'm disgusting. I'm an awful human being. It really is. I didn't realize before I did this how insidious shame is, and how it's so much different from something like regret or remorse. It really is self-indulgent. Yeah, I mean, it's better than nothing, I suppose. But you know, and I like this imagery. You know, there's this sort of beautiful woman, and for whatever reason, he's kind of cursed her, and then he's turned her into this vengeful spirit here, this raging kind of spirit. And he's down on his knee, offering up his weapon and saying that he doesn't want to fight. He's being penitent and asking for forgiveness. And I like that image. He's kind of humbling himself before his past. And I only needed one for this one, and it's my classic. My identity is no longer externally derived, but internally implied. I mean, that is just pure juiciness. And then for the opposite of this one, we've got him allowing himself to be constructed by someone else. So powerful imagery. It's like I don't even need to remember those two. I can just remember the imagery. No, yes, no. And we got the dude here. So in this one, he's protecting the villagers. In this one, he's legging it and they're all getting scorched. This is protecting myself and others. This one for me was as important as responsibility, because it's taking the responsibility that I need to protect other people and not harm them, which is what I did. If I behave with care and consideration for others, even when they're not present, I reduce the likelihood of harming them. Understanding someone else's subjective experience is a powerful way of taking action to limit their suffering and increase cohesion. Sounds like it should be common sense, right? To try and understand other people's experiences and how they're seeing things. But, you know, to me, it hasn't been so much. I've been quite wrapped up in myself and my own experience. And that's opposed to, I'm so funny, they're going to love this joke. It's just assuming that everyone shares the same sense of humour as you. If you don't think it's inappropriate, they're not going to think it's inappropriate. It's just a joke. Who wouldn't find that funny? Come on. I look for ways to let go of my hatred and resentment, seeing these feelings for what they are, a protective layer that seeks to bypass guilt. Even saying I'm broken and berating myself is a way of bypassing through self-pity, or suggesting I couldn't have acted any other way. I'm broken after all. Shaming yourself isn't truly taking responsibility. Having concern for that person you harmed, consideration for their welfare, acknowledging what you did to harm them. In short, really facing it, not making it about myself, how much I'm hurting because of it. And that's something that I wouldn't have been able to get at unless I'd done this process. And I can't tell you how it happened fully or how I got to it, but I just did. I found my way to it through doing this process. And I hope that you have found your way to this video, although I doubt you will because no one watches my videos. And then that is opposed to, I'll never forgive them for what they've done. Putting someone through this is just not right. I didn't deserve this. God, I'm such a disgusting piece of shit. I'm truly broken. You can see the contradiction here too. Bouncing back between these two all the time, as if almost like they're related or something. Do you know what I mean? I'll never forgive them. Oh, I'm so disgusting. It's both quite self-indulgent. Alright, so over here, we've got this guy in the midst of a battle here, fighting the opposite of forgiveness, empathy, and compassion, full of rage, vengeance. Alright. I have to figure out why I did that, or why they acted that way. You know, this idea of just being obsessed with the past all the time, needing to figure it out constantly. I mean, that is rumination, right? People interpret things in their own way. While it may hurt, I can practice letting go of control. Again, that's tied to creating my own identity, as opposed to, I have to figure out why I did that or why they acted that way. I do my best to control how people view me so I can like myself. And then, absolutely, finally, social skills. I can't control other people's behaviour towards me, but I can reduce the likelihood of alienation by speaking and acting in a socially acceptable manner, as opposed to everyone being offended and annoyed and yelling at this not this poor person, this person at the table. And I tried desperately to win the approval of others through the use of humour, even when it's inappropriate. So that's that, guys. And then finally, we move over to the very last part of the process, which I haven't fleshed out too much, but it's this test and apply the new model. So here, what I've done is I've kind of just grabbed a few of the principles and I've popped them over here. And the idea here is that you're taking them out into the field to test them out, and you're asking yourself, you know, what difference do they make? So here we've got this question: is it more efficient, accurate, and insightful than what I used before? So Did I gain a deeper understanding of the situation when I was able to turn inwards and understand my own projections? How does it affect my experience of life when I let go of controlling how others see me? When I act from an inner set of values, do I feel more control or less? So this is like field testing, guys, just to see if this new way of doing things, this new weapon here, is actually going to hold up. And if it doesn't, you go back to the drawing board. Does this make my life easier when I implement it? Does it create less suffering for myself and others? What happened when I was able to take a breath and not react emotionally, and I've coloured them according to the sections that they're from? Does it feel better? Does it feel more empowering to let go of blame? How does it feel when I take the time to understand someone else's experience? These you can see we've distilled everything down like a distillation process. We had so much to begin with, and we do still have a lot, but we've kind of funneled it all down here into these powerful principles that we really, really resonate with, or these fundamental core kind of ideas or lessons that we've taken from this whole process that we're now going to take out into the world. So what happens when I fight the urge to joke all of the time? See, that's a huge one for me. For me, joking it's like social glue. I've always done it ever since I was at school. Um, you know, I feel really uncomfortable with like silences and stuff like that. Or it was my way to feel like accepted when I was at school. It was the only way I could feel like I was any worth, to joke and sort of make people laugh, because it made them like me. People liked me, or they wanted me around when I could make them laugh. But you can see how that fired now. But actually, it's all led to me doing this work, and that's a good thing. So yeah, use real world action to validate or improve your new construction. And over time, keep jumping back. You've got plenty more here to work on. Say you feel like you've kind of mastered those principles, come back over here and grab a couple more and get to work on them. And you really will find that there's a lot of similar themes going on here anyway. So yeah, you've got all of these to keep jumping in on, and yeah. So if you made it through this video, that's absolutely awesome. And I think this process is amazing. It really is. And let me know how you get on with it in the comments section. If you've got any questions at all, let me know. I'll put some links to the web versions of these rooms. There's like 4 rooms in total that I created, just so I could show you the process at different steps along the way. And I'll put links to all of those. I will also put links to the CSV files that you can download or install if you've got a VR headset. If you've got this app Noda is £4 a month to subscribe to. There's a free version, but you won't be able to import any of the maps unless you've got the unless you subscribe. But it's really worth it. There is another video as well that will show you how to import and export CSV files into Noda when you have it, so check that out. And I mean, that would really be my ultimate wish for you guys, is that if you had one of these headsets here, you were able to jump in and do the process in virtual reality. Because oh my god, I haven't really even been able to do this work until I've had this medium, or this way of creating and viewing information. Yeah, I can't do things on paper. Do you know what I mean? Paper gets lost. I mean, just look at this stuff. Like, imagine trying to interact with all of this on paper. Which is like, here I can float around this room, I can look at different sections. This is an actual world here that I've created with my mind to develop myself. Okay, It is vastly superior as far as I'm concerned to using paper. But, you know, like I say, these headsets are quite cheap now. Get yourself a headset, get yourself Noda. If you've got any questions about how to do the process or how to get Noda working, let me know. But like I say, you can do it all on pen and paper. Guys, this is awesome. This is a new identity. This is a new way of being. I feel so much better after having done this. And I just want to say, I'm worried about people that know me watching this video, people that, you know, like my ex-girlfriend or whatever. I don't think she'll find the video because my name isn't attached to this channel. But if she has, I hope, I don't know, I hope you've got something from watching it. Sorry for what happened. If you can't forgive me, I understand that it isn't something that you're able to forgive. I love you, and I'll live with what happened for the rest of my life. And if it's any consolation, I'm trying to do better, and I'm trying to grow myself and make sure that I don't upset anyone else. So if you are watching this, I am really sorry and I love you. And yeah, I love you guys too. I love anyone else that's decided to watch this, anyone that is that serious about themselves and their own development, that they would put the time into doing something like this. I think that's pretty amazing, because if we were all able to go in and really look at all of our biases and find ways to do better and to look after each other more, I think the world would be a better place, in the words of Tommy Wiseau. So take care, my good people.